Ask PlayStation RPG fans what game deserves a remake the most, and one title almost always comes out without hesitation: The Legend of Dragoon. Not Final Fantasy, not Chrono Trigger, but this 1999 PlayStation exclusive somehow became one of the most emotionally persistent cult classics in JRPG history. And the strange part? It was never a massive mainstream success. It didn't define the industry. It didn't break sales records, but somehow, people still talk about it like it defined their childhood anyway.
Indeed.
Released in 1999 for the original PlayStation, The Legend of Dragoon was Sony's ambitious attempt to enter the JRPG space during its golden era. And that era was no joke. Final Fantasy VII had already changed gaming culture. Chrono Cross was around the corner. Suikoden 2 had cemented itself as a cult masterpiece. So for a new RPG to stand out, it needed something different. And The Legend of Dragoon didn't try to compete directly. Instead, it carved its identity through combat systems, presentation, and tone. Even if it didn't reach blockbuster status, it absolutely secured a lasting legacy. And in some cases, that matters more. One of the most defining mechanics in the game was the addition system. Instead of selecting an attack and watching an animation play out passively, players had to time button inputs during combat. Each attack became a sequence, a rhythm, a skill check. Miss the timing and your combo breaks, landed perfectly, and you'd deal significantly higher damage. This transformed traditional turn-based combat into something more interactive, more engaging, more demanding. And for many players, it was the first time a JRPG battle system felt like something they were actively participating in rather than observing. It wasn't just strategy anymore, it was execution, and that made every fight feel more personal. Looking back, the late PlayStation 1 era was extremely competitive. You had giants everywhere. Final Fantasy VII and 8 dominated mainstream attention. Chrono Cross pushed narrative experimentation. Suikoden 2 refined ensemble storytelling. So where does The Legend of Dragoon fit in? It didn't try to outshine them. It didn't try to reinvent JRPG storytelling. Instead, it focused on identity. A darker fantasy tone, a more grounded medieval setting, a slower narrative rhythm, and a combat system that felt mechanically different. It wasn't the most polished RPG of its generation, but it was distinct enough to be remembered. And in a crowded era, that's often enough. At its core, the story follows Dart and his companions on a journey filled with war, destiny, betrayal, and ancient power. While the narrative structure may feel familiar today, for players at the time, it carried emotional weight. Characters developed slowly over time, relationships evolved through shared conflict, and the stakes gradually escalated into something much larger than personal revenge or heroism. It wasn't about complex storytelling twists. It was about emotional progression. And that's what made it resonate with players during their formative gaming years. Because even simple stories can leave strong impressions when experienced at the right time. Unlike many RPGs of its era, The Legend of Dragoon never received a sequel, reboot, or expanded franchise. And ironically, that absence may have strengthened its legacy. Because the story was never continued, it became preserved in its original form. Unchanged, unrevisited, unresolved in the eyes of fans who wanted more. So the community adapted. They replayed the game. They shared memories online. They created discussions, theories, and nostalgia threads across forums and later social media. And every time PlayStation showcases or remasters are discussed, the same question returns. Is this finally the Dragoon remake? That cycle has continued for years. And it keeps the game alive in a way most forgotten titles never achieve. Modern RPG design has evolved significantly since 1999. But The Legend of Dragoon still stands out because of its core ideas. The addition system remains one of the most memorable attempts at interactive turn-based combat in its era. And the Dragoon transformation system still represents a strong power fantasy concept that could easily be modernized. If anything, the game feels more interesting in hindsight than it did at release. Because players now understand how rare its design choices actually were. The legacy of Dragoon never became a genre-defining blockbuster, but it became something arguably more lasting. A deeply personal RPG experience for people who played it. It didn't dominate the market, it dominated memory instead. And that's why decades later, it still comes up in conversations about forgotten classics. Because impact isn't always measured in sales or awards. Sometimes it's measured in how clearly people still remember it. The Legend of Dragoon is more than a forgotten PS1 RPG. It's a reminder that the game doesn't need to define an industry to define someone's experience of it. And for its fans, it wasn't just another RPG in the library. It was their RPG. A game they never truly stopped remembering. A world they never fully left. And a legacy that refuses to fade. For more content like this and other updates down the line, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.